all right. So what's this big research project?
All right.
What'd you do over here?
So it was last Friday where I just had some time on my hands. I wasn't calling any games. I wasn't hosting any shows. Well, not during the day at least. So I just I hear people keep talking about we're kind of alleviating the Bears of responsibility, and they just need to quote unquote get the right guy. They just got to draft the right quarterback, and it's this magic elixir. And in my mind, I had a few teams, I've been tweeting about it a little bit in recent weeks also, where there's some teams in my head that have won consistently, really for decades at this point, without necessarily having kind of that one guy that's done it. The Patriots are an example of, they had the one guy and the one coach, and they won a bunch over the last 20 plus years, really, with that combination. So I removed the Patriots from this. I removed the Steelers from this because Ben Roethlisberger was there for so long. I removed the Packers from this with 2 back-to-back Hall of Fame quarterbacks. But I just went and I looked at every team in the NFL and went, over the last 25 years, how often have they made the playoffs? How often have they been 500 or better? How many different coaches and quarterbacks have taken them to postseason play? And the Bears, for an example, are a team who, the way I listed the Bears, and part of this last 25 years is because back in 1999, the Bears drafted Cade McNown in the first round. 2003, they drafted Rex Grossman. Then they drafted 2 other first-round quarterbacks, of course. More recently, 2017 was Mitchell Trubisky. 2021 was Justin Fields. But which teams have drafted, developed, or just acquired quarterbacks and found a way to have success, regardless of whether or not they've drafted that guy in the first round, drafted that guy number 1 overall? There's a bunch of teams who find consistent success. Frankly, at a much higher level, like I've heard you use the San Francisco example of kind of the 49ers being the lone team that's kind of cracked that code.
Well, I'm not going back 25 years with it just as the game has changed. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but being the team who's kind of done that, and a bunch of teams, like the team who over the last quarter century has done it at the highest level most consistently, has been Baltimore. Baltimore's made 14 out of the last 25 playoffs. They've been 500 or better in Baltimore 20 times out of the last 25 years. They just happen to be in an exceptional division where being 500 or better 20 out of the last 25 years doesn't always get you to the playoffs. But they've been to a couple of Super Bowls, won both of those between Brian Billick and John Harbaugh. John Harbaugh, not a guy who was an offensive play caller before becoming the Ravens head coach.
Yep.
Quarterbacks who've taken them to the playoffs: Trent Dilfer, Kyle Bowler, Steve McNair, Joe Flacco, Lamar Jackson. None of them was the number 1 pick by the Baltimore Ravens. Philadelphia would be next on that list, 16 of the last 25 playoffs, 1 and 2 in Super Bowls over the last quarter century. Seattle, not a team who you think of having, exceptional high level, like number 1 pick quarterback success. But the Seahawks, between Mike Holmgren and Pete Carroll, those are the 2 coaches who've been best over that time. They will both be in the Hall of Fame, of course.
Yeah.
Holmgren already there, but John Kitna, Matt Hasselbeck,
Yep.
Russell Wilson, of course, have taken them to the playoffs. And in that time, they're 1 and 2 in Super Bowls with those guys at QB. Kansas City was actually a team that surprised me because I didn't think of the Chiefs, and you were obviously in Kansas City, but I didn't think of them as far as the last quarter century of being a franchise that just consistently does it at a high level.
Trent Green won a bunch. Alex Smith won a bunch.
Yeah, I thought of them as a team just in the last sort of, maybe decade here. But you go back, 12 out of the last 25 playoffs. 17 times they've been 500 or better in the last 25 years. And 3 Super Bowl appearances, 2-1 in that time. Of course, 2 of those with Patrick Mahomes at quarterback. But between Dick Vermeil, Herm Edwards, Todd Haley, Andy Reid, a variety of coaches have taken Kansas City to at least the playoffs, and then being able to make the Super Bowl. There have been a few different guys who've been able to actually get that done, or all 3 Super Bowls with Patrick Mahomes as quarterback there. So just kind of looking at the last quarter century, and to me, a team like the Cowboys, we never hear of the Cowboys tearing it down or tanking to get the top pick or doing anything like that. They're always going for it, and they're always in the mix. In Dallas, they've been 500 or better 18 times in the last 25 years without saying we got to go get the number 1 quarterback in the draft to make it happen. So I think saying that getting the right guy, quote unquote, is what the Bears need to focus on, that to me absolves the Bears of franchises like this. A bunch of examples of teams who've won at a much higher level than the Bears have over the last quarter century. You look at the last decade, over the last decade, a bunch of teams who've won at a higher level than the Bears without having that number 1 pick. The infrastructure around the quarterback, the decision-making associated with who you get at QB, whether it's in the draft or in a trade or free agency or anything else, that matters to me even more so than having the opportunity for the number 1 pick. And I think that because of the discussion we've had about the last couple of quarterbacks, Trubisky, Fields and whether or not the play caller is right, whether or not the quarterback is right. The Bears as a franchise have not won at nearly as high a level of a bunch of other teams. There's teams that I haven't even listed yet that win at a higher level than the Bears over the last quarter century. Let's just call it this century here, who aren't necessarily one of these top teams in football, but are consistently in the mix far more often than the Bears are.
So I love the work and what you did. I do think that we're arguing like slightly different points here.
Okay.
Like you said, I removed the Patriots, Packers, Colts, Steelers, and Saints because it came with Hall of Fame quarterback play.
Right.
You also then removed the majority of the Super Bowls of the last 25 years.
Yeah.
Literally more than half of them.
All right.
You know what I mean? And so the goal isn't to have a better than 500 season. The goal is not to make the playoffs. That's not the goal. The goal is to win the Super Bowl. And for these guys to actually win Super Bowls, the Chiefs, they won 10 games, 11 games with Alex Smith. They won 12, 13 games with Trent Green.
All right.
And then they ran into Peyton Manning in the playoffs and lost in a game they didn't punt. You know, like, so yes. I mean, I covered a Bears team that won 12 games with Mitch Trubisky and the number one defense that turned it over, but it wasn't sustainable. It popped up for a year. And so, like, you've removed the franchise Hall of Fame quarterbacks who've won more than half of the Super Bowls in the last quarter of a century in your data set. And so to me, like, there's no disputing that the Bears top to bottom organizationally are not as good as a bunch of other teams. And that, like, if you just hire a great coach and then that raises the floor consistently, and the Bears have had way too many bad coaches. The fact that the Brad Biggs stat where they've only had 2 offensive coordinators last longer than 2 years in the last 25 years. They've had 13 offensive coordinators in the last 26 years. That is a staggering amount of turnover, right, for that position. So there is no continuity. But you were talking about earlier how you thought it was the McCaskies that were uncomfortable with Jim Harbaugh.
Right.
And I agree. Like, that's why I unfortunately think the savior has to be the quarterback because, and I've said this 100 times and I just like to turn a phrase, the Bengals were the Bungles until they got Joe Burrow. They lost more games over a 20-year run than the Bears did with Mike Brown as their owner. They were the losingest franchise in the NFL. Marvin Lewis won some games in the regular season with Andy Dalton. Never won anything in the playoffs. They were thrilled to go 9-7 and lose in the first round of the playoffs. They eventually get the number 1 pick, get this franchise-altering guy, and now their Super Bowl window of contention, his words, is open as long as he's there. He's been in 2 AFC Championship games, won 1, lost in a Super Bowl 4 years into the NFL. Do I wish that the Bears operated organizationally with a history of hiring prowess like the Chiefs did? Hiring Dick Vermeil, having Carl Peterson as a GM, attracting Andy Reid to come there. Of course. But they don't. And I can't get the McCaskies to sell the team. I wanted them to fire Matt Eberflus and take a swing at Jim Harbaugh and take a swing at Ben Johnson and try to get a better coach. But they don't want to pay Matt Eberflus's staff for 2 years to go away and then pay a head coach $15 to $20 million a year. Like, I can't change who owns the team. Andy Reid became a free agent when he left Philadelphia. Clark Hunt canceled plans, got on a private jet, flew to Philadelphia, and met him in an airport hangar when he was getting ready to go interview for a different job. Intercepted his job interview, never took the other interview, then flew him back to Kansas City, and he got his man.
And in whatever way, the Chargers did something similar with Jim Harbaugh, where he had a second interview scheduled with the Falcons. They said, that's not happening. We're going to make this happen now. And Jim Harbaugh's the coach of the Chargers.
So, of course, I wish that I rooted for an organization that had, like, the Ravens pedigree of hiring coaches and Ozzie Newsome and like 20 years of, like, beating their teams by the draft. But we don't.
My point is that's more plausible, though, because the one quarterback who cures everything is the outlier. That's not normally how it works. Normally it is we get great personnel. We get quality coaching who develops the entire roster, and then we can build a consistent winner from there. Like since Troy Aikman, and you can even make an argument about Troy Aikman, but certainly since Troy Aikman, is Tony Romo an all-time great QB? No. Is Dak Prescott an all-time great QB at this point? No. But the Cowboys are in the mix on an annual basis every single year in a deep division. They win games time after time.
No question.
Cowboys fans watch their team do it year in and year out, and then they get disappointed in the playoffs. But the way the Cowboys have been able to accomplish it, the way the Eagles have been able to accomplish
Romo and Dak would be the best quarterback in Bears franchise history by a significant margin.
But is it because each of them, late round pick for Dak and undrafted free agent for Romo, is that because both of them were just remarkably capable? Or did Jerry Jones, to his credit, actually put a team in place that nurtured their talents?
Definitely. I think probably a combination of both. But yeah, absolutely. They hit on a higher percentage of draft picks and have built a better team around them and all of that. The opportunity, though, that is here for the Bears is to take a swing at one of those guys who can be the great elixir.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the thing. Like if the Bears didn't have Carolina's pick, we'd be talking about like, okay, I hope Ryan Poles is as good at this as we see, and he's got to build it up, and he's got to hit on a couple more first-round picks, and he's got to find some late-round guys. And it doesn't mean that he still doesn't need to do those things. A quarterback alone can't win, but that isn't what the Bears have. They have Montez Sweat, and they have DJ Moore, and they have Cole Kmet, and they have Tevin Jenkins, and they have Darnell Wright, and they have Jaquan Brisker, and Jalen Johnson, and Tyreek Stevenson, and Kyler Gordon, and Javon Dexter. They've got like a pretty good team.
Yeah, building a growing young roster.
Yeah. So if Ryan Poles just has one more good offseason and upgrades at quarterback, they can be the Lions. They can absolutely be playing divisional weekend of the NFL playoffs next year for sure.
Right.
It's not that I don't wish that they had oh God, why am I blanking on his name? Phillies GM.
Roseman?
Yeah, Howie Roseman. Yeah. Obviously. Like he's one of the most valuable people in the entire NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Like just like a different coach, different quarterback, within the two different Super Bowls within a 5-year period of time. Like that's good executiving.
But
but it's hard. It's hard. That's also hard to do.
In this scenario, if Ryan Poles is Howie Roseman or some version of him, stockpiling your roster puts you in that position more plausibly to take the North and never give it back than just finding that one quarterback who kind of solves things.
That
for
I disagree
you.
with.
Okay. You think it's more plausible to find the quarterback who cures everything than it is to build a roster that can just continue to churn out wins.
But do you think that the Lions, Brad Holmes just won Executive of the Year since we've been on the air. Yeah. He has every draft pick of his 3 drafts are still on the Lions. Like he seems to be great at this, right, on a 3-year sample. I don't think they're set up for 10 years of success. Because linemen get old and receivers get old and whereas like the teams that you've just like removed from your sample. Like I agree they are the first ballot Hall of Famer quarterbacks, but like if you have Aaron Rodgers, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, Tom Brady, if you've got a shot to get one of those guys, those are the guys that individually are the through line, and they go to the playoffs 8 times in 10 years.
But out of the teams that, and I've just mentioned the teams who are kind of at the top of the pecking order there, were Baltimore, Philadelphia, Seattle, Kansas City, Dallas.
Yep.
Out of those squads, the only one that went high and drafted the QB who kind of did it all for him is Kansas City. And Patrick Mahomes was the 10th pick in the draft or something like that?
Yep.
But none of these teams drafted a QB number 1 overall and did it. All of them had infrastructure in place that have actually sustained their success over the last quarter century at a really high level. Even the Minnesota Vikings, like we don't think of the Minnesota Vikings as this great franchise. That was one that surprised me and said, oh, the Vikings have more consistently won at a high level. They haven't been to a Super Bowl. But between Jeff George, Dante Culpepper, Gus Frerotte, Brett Favre, Christian Ponder, Teddy Bridgewater, Case Keenum, Kirk Cousins, those are all guys who've at least taken the Vikings to the playoffs in that time over the last quarter century. More often than the Bears have been able to muster that in Chicago. Tampa Bay. Now, Tampa Bay has been to 2 Super Bowls in that time, but Trent Dilfer, Sean King, Brad Johnson, Chris Sims, Jeff Garcia, Tom Brady, and Baker Mayfield have all taken Tampa Bay to the playoffs here. I don't remember how was Trent Dilfer number 1 overall pick. I don't remember how high Trent got drafted. I don't think he was number 1 overall.
He was like the 5th pick or something like that. He was a high pick. He was a big time prospect.
Tampa Bay is even a franchise who've done it more consistently than the Bears have, and have also won 2 Super Bowls over the last quarter century without having that one guy who kind of gets everything done for you within the draft. They got a great roster together and then went out and spent money, brought Tom Brady in, and then took things to that Super Bowl level with him, winning one with Tom Brady. But even Tampa Bay has been more consistently successful than the Bears over the last quarter century without having that one guy that just cures everything for them. So I'm not saying having the one guy, like having, if you go get Drew Brees when he's available or, to draft Joe Burrow when he's there, I'm not saying that's not a bad thing. And as we discussed earlier in the show, I think the Bears will and probably in my mind should go ahead and draft Caleb Williams number 1 overall. My point is we shouldn't absolve the rest of the infrastructure the Bears need in place to set Caleb Williams up for success, because I have heard you say that San Francisco is the only team who's proven to be QB proof, and I don't think that's accurate. I think there's a lot of teams who win consistently in the NFL and at times have cycled through quarterbacks over the last decade or last couple of decades, like I lay out here, who just more consistently have a roster and a coaching staff in place that can get it done, and they've more consistently done it than the Bears.
You're 100% right. I guess what I'm talking about is like, again, I think it's
kind of 2 different cases being made.
Well, 2 different bars to clear. Like winning season, making the playoffs for sure. Real shot at a Super Bowl. I don't think there are a lot of examples of
But you don't think the Cowboys haven't won a Super Bowl? They haven't even made a Super Bowl.
No, they've had a real shot at it.
I thought they were going to get a run at it this year, and they didn't again. But I mean, they're there every year. Like being in the mix every year is hard.
Yep.
But there's a bunch of teams who are in the mix almost every year without having that one guy that's cured everything for them. There's a lot of organizations that have just been better than the Bears have, regardless of who the QB is, has been at Haugh Hall.
You're right. I mean, the Ravens right now, anyway, he's about to win his 2nd MVP. He wasn't drafted number 1,
right? But
he is a Hall of Fame quarterback.
He's on that track, yeah.
I mean, if he wins 2 MVPs, there's no multi-MVP who's not in the Hall of Fame, So and he would have 2 unanimous MVPs by the time he's 27. So it would be. I feel pretty comfortable in saying that Lamar is on a Hall of Fame track right now. Obviously, Mahomes, who, if he wins this Super Bowl, will have the 3rd most playoff wins ever, and has been a starter for 6 years and is 6 for 6 of making the AFC Championship.
But I don't divorce Mahomes' success from the situation he's in Kansas City.
Neither do I.
He's incredible. I don't know that I believe he would be the Patrick Mahomes that we see right now if he were here in Chicago, though.
I don't think that the Bears would be in 6 straight NFC Championship games if Mahomes came here instead of going to Reed, Kelsey, Tyreek Hill, obviously. But I think that the Bears would have had a 4,000-yard franchise passer by now and a 30-touchdown franchise passer and would have won a playoff game or 2. But you know what I mean? Like I do think that. I do think that like they would have figured that part of it out, and that he's won with bad offensive lines, he's won with bad defenses, he's won with all sorts of different ways. I think he is truly, truly very special, obviously. And yeah, the San Francisco thing is how Brock Purdy has become a polarizing figure in how people look at this sort of thing. Like, how many quarterbacks do you think plugged into that system would have had roughly his degree of success? Because I think it's a big number. And my only evidence to that is that Jimmy Garoppolo had a ton of success there, hasn't had much elsewhere.
Right.
Even when he was in a Super Bowl, they traded 3 first-round picks to try to upgrade from him, to try to get special at quarterback. And then when that guy failed, the guy they picked last has had a tremendous amount of success there and was the favorite to be the MVP week 15 of the NFL season. Yeah. And they think that if he would have stayed healthy last year, they would have won last year's Super Bowl. And they've got a pretty damn compelling case for it. So they seem to be the type of team that has been able to like plug in.
Yeah.
But then to argue against it, like Deebo Samuel gets hurt and he starts to struggle and his numbers go way down.
Right, because he's human, but he's still got George Kittle and he's still got Christian McCaffrey, and so that still matters. There's talent there and an excellent offensive line, and
but
a defense that keeps him in it.
The question would be like if in 2 years Trent Williams retired, Deebo Samuel was on another team, and McCaffrey was past his prime. Is Brock Purdy good enough to keep the Niners winning double-digit games and in contention? And if the answer to that is no,
but then
that's why I would
many
want a guy like
QBs are, I think, because
hopefully the guy the Bears are about to draft.
If we're judging them by that Super Bowl is what we measure success as, if we're judging them by that standard, there are so few who walk the earth that are that.
Agreed. But they can get one.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah, no, but what I'm saying is, of course, potentially.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the most valuable thing in the sport.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because Belichick has a losing record without Brady. You know?
Yeah. It had the one Matt Castle season, but
he had an 11-win Matt Castle season. Other than that, has not been good, and that team won 17 games the season before. They were literally undefeated.
Yeah.
So, or 16 games. They won 5 fewer games when Brady got hurt.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so like I agree with you they're unicorns. I agree with you they're rare, but they are the single most valuable thing in football. It's not that they're the only thing you need.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that you don't need to support them. And
the most valuable thing in sports, like
that's
anywhere in the sports universe, quarterback is the position that is most valuable. It is also the position that is most dependent. It is this odd juxtaposition where quarterbacks, it takes so much to be amazing at quarterback individually, but also so many things around you have to perform at a high level for you to win at a high level. And that's the interesting juxtaposition where the Bears are at right now, because it's amazing opportunity with back-to-back years of the number 1 overall pick awaits them and is, just there for them to grab, and they're probably going to do it. But
isn't it good enough? Don't they have enough around Caleb where you would say he's not coming into a situation where he would fail? It doesn't have to be perfect for him as a rookie.
Mm-hmm.
If he's as special as everyone says it is, and you sign a veteran.
I think it's more about the long-term bet. I don't think this coming season, I don't think Caleb Williams will step into the Bears and be a better quarterback than Justin Fields will be in 2024. But the long-term play, my impression right now is that long-term I would project Caleb at a higher level than Justin. It's still, I don't know some of the,
of course,
the intangible aspects of it, but my impression is I view him as a higher level prospect coming out of college than I viewed Justin Fields coming out of college.
I'm just saying, assuming they sign a veteran center, right, so that we can get him the ball snapped to him on time.
Be a good start.
Caleb and that addition, plus everything else that's around him, the coaches, the line, the play, the receivers, the defense, all of it, that's not the David Carr situation.
Yeah, right.
That's not the Sam Bradford with the Rams situation.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like that is a situation where he should be able to. Doesn't mean that they don't have to keep adding around him. Doesn't mean they don't have to do a good job. Doesn't mean they don't have to stay healthy and all that. But like that is a situation that Caleb Williams should be able to reach his potential in the coming seasons, plural. And that's like, yeah. So if the argument is like trade the pick, get a bunch of assets to like keep building up the team around him so that it's like a perfect situation to drop the quarterback into, it's like never going to be a perfect situation to drop the quarterback into, and you don't know that you'll ever get a chance to draft this caliber of prospect.
Right.
Again,
which is why I think the Bears will likely do it. Yeah. And I would be on board. I would be on board with either version of it. They're likely to do it. It will probably make sense. It shouldn't absolve them of how good everything else needs to be as well.
I agree with you on that. I don't think
a lot of teams here who do it at a high level without drafting that guy number 1.
There are. The Super Bowl stuff, though, is you're like, I just removed Manning, Brady, Breeze, Packers. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, because how many teams get Manning or Brady or Breeze? But what's the more plausible route towards sustained success? The unicorn quarterback or a franchise that just has good coaching and a talented roster? The good coaching and talented roster thing, that happens more frequently than the unicorn quarterback.
Yeah, for 9 or 10 wins.
Or consistent playoff berths and the occasional Super Bowl.
Yeah. I want the dynasty. I want to take the shot at the dynasty. I want to take the shot. I want to take the shot at it. Mm-hmm. And if it busts, we'll be back here in a few years, boy. Talking about the 2029 class. Does Arch Manning have a younger brother? Let's bring him on. It's Parkins Spiegel.